Hi everyone, I hope you're all well. I hope you had a good weekend. On to the last chapter of Kensuke's Kingdom. Busy enough at school, but I miss you guys. Hopefully we'll get to see each other again soon, so let's get on with it. Right, chapter 10. Killer Men Come. Shortly after this, the rains came and forced us to shelter for days on end inside the cave house. The tracks became torrents, the forest became a swamp. I longed for the howl of the gibbons instead of the roar of the rain on the trees outside. It did not rain in fits and starts as it did at home, but constantly, incessantly. I worried over our beacon. Was it becoming more saturated with every passing day? Would it ever dry out? Would this rain ever stop? But Kensuke was stoical about it all. It stopped when it stopped, Mika-san, he told me. You cannot make rain stop by wanting it to stop. Besides, rain very good thing. Keep fruit flowing, keep stream flowing, keep monkeys alive. You, me, also. I did make a dash up to the hilltop every morning with the binoculars, but I don't know why I bothered. Sometimes it was raining so hard I could hardly see the sea at all. Occasionally we sallied out to the forest to gather enough fruit to keep us going. There were berries growing in abundance now, which Kensuke insisted on gathering. He didn't seem to mind getting soaked to the skin as much as I did. We ate some, but most he turned into vinegar. For the rest he bottled in honey and water. For rainy day, yes? He laughed. He loved experimenting with the new expressions he had picked up. We ate a lot of smoked fish. He always seemed to have enough in reserve. It made me very thirsty, but I never tired of it. I remember the rainy season more for the painting than we did for anything else. We painted together for hours on end, until the octopus ink ran out. These days, Kensuke was painting more from his memory, his house in Nagasaki, and several portraits of Kimi and Michiya standing together, always under the cherry tree. The faces, I noticed, he always left very indistinct. He once explained this to me. He was more and more fluent now in his English. I remember who they are, he said. I remember where they are. I can hear them in my head, but I cannot see them. I spent days perfecting my first attempt at an orangutan. It was of Tamadachi. She would often crouch soulful and dripping at the cave mouth, almost as if she was posing for me, so I took full advantage. Kensuke was ecstatic in his delight at my painting, and lavish in his praise. One day, Mika-san, you will be fine painter like Hokusai, maybe. That was the first shell painting of mine he kept and stored away in his chest. I felt so proud. After that, he insisted on keeping many of my shell paintings. He would often take them out of the chest and study them carefully, showing me where I might improve, but always generously. Under his watchful eye, in the glow of his encouragement, every picture I painted seemed more accomplished, more how I wanted it to be. Then one day the gibbons were howling again, and the rains had stopped. We went fishing in the shallows, out at sea too, and had very soon replenished our stores of smoked fish and octopus ink. We played football again, and all the while the beacon on the hilltop was drying out. Wherever we went now, we took the binoculars with us just in case. We very nearly lost them once when Kikambo, Tomodachi's errand son, always the cheekiest, most playful of all the young orangutans, stole them and ran off into the forest. When we caught up with him, he didn't want to surrender them at all. In the end, Kensuke had to bribe him, a red banana for a pair of binoculars. But, as time passed, we were beginning to live as if we were going to stay on the island forever, and that began to trouble me deeply. Kensuke made repairs to his outrigger. He made more vinegar. He collected herbs and dried them in the sun, and he seemed less and less interested in looking for a ship. He seemed to have forgotten all about it. He sensed my restlessness. He was working on the boat one day, and ever hopeful, I was scanning the sea through the horizons. It is easier when you are old like me, Mika-san, he said. What is? Waiting, he said. One day a ship will come, Mika-san. Maybe soon, maybe not so soon, but it will come. Life will not always be spent hoping, always waiting. Life is for living. I knew he was right, of course, but only when I was lost and absorbed in my painting was I truly able to obliterate all the thoughts of rescue, all thoughts of my mother and father. I woke one day, and Stella was barking outside the cave house. I got up and went out after her. At first, she was nowhere to be seen. When I did find her, she was high up on the hill, half growling, half barking. Her hackles were up. I soon saw why. A junk. A small junk far out to sea. So a junk is a type of ship in China and Japan. I scrambled down the hill and met Kensuke coming out of the cave house, buckling his belt. There's a boat, I cried. The fire! Let's light the fire! First I looked, said Kensuke. And despite all my protestations, he went back into the cave house for his binoculars. I raced up the hill again. The junk was close enough to shore. They would be bound to see the smoke. I was sure of it. Kensuke was making his way up towards me infuriatingly slowly. He seemed to be in no hurry at all. He studied the boat carefully now through his binoculars, taking his time about it. "We've got to light the fire," I said. "We've got to." Kensuke caught me suddenly by the arm. "It is the same boat, Mika-san. Killer men come. They kill the gibbons and steal away the babies. They come back again, I'm very sure. I do not forget the boat. I never forget. They very wicked people. We must go quick. We must find all orangutans. We must bring them into the cave. They'll be safe there." It did not take long to gather them in. As we walked into the forest, Kensuke began to sing. They materialized out of nowhere in twos and threes until we had 15 of them. 4 were still missing. We went deeper and deeper into the forest to find them, Kensuke singing all the while. Then 3 more came crashing through the trees, Tomodachi amongst them. Only one that was still missing, Kikambo. Standing there in the clearing in the forest, surrounded by the orangutans, Kensuke sang for Kikambo again and again, but he did not come. Then we heard a motor start up, somewhere out to sea, an outboard motor. Kensuke sang out louder now, more urgently. We listened for Kikambo. We looked for him. We called for him. "We cannot wait any more," said Kensuke at last. "I go in front, Mika-san. You go behind. Bring last ones with you. Quick now." And off he went up the track, leading one of the orangutans by the hand and still singing. As we followed, I remember thinking that this was like being the Pied Piper, leading the children away into a cave in the mountainside. I had my work cut out at the back. Some of the younger orangutans were far more interested in playing hide-and-seek than following. In the end, I had to scoop up 2 of them and carry them, one in each crook of each arm. They were a great deal heavier than they looked. I kept glancing back over my shoulder for Kikambo and calling for him, but he did not come. The outboard motor died. I heard voices, loud voices, men's voices, laughter. I was running now, the orangutans clinging around my neck. The forest hooted and howled in alarm all around me. As I reached the cave, I heard the first shots ring out. Every bird, every bat in the forest lifted off so that the screeching sky was black with them. We gathered the orangutans together at the back of the cave and huddled there in the darkness with them as the shooting went on and on. Of all of them, Tomodachi was the most agitated, but they all needed constant comfort and reassurance from Kensuke. All through this dreadful nightmare, Kensuke sang to them softly. The hunters were nearer, ever nearer, shooting and shouting. I closed my eyes. I prayed. The orangutans whispered aloud as if they were singing along with Kensuke. All this while Stella lay at my feet, a permanent growl in her throat. I held onto the ruff of her neck just in case. The young orangutans burrowed their heads into me wherever they could, under my arms, under my knees, and clung on. The shots cracked so close now, spitting the air and split and echoing around the cave. There were distinct yells of triumph. I knew only too well what this must mean. After that, the hunt moved away. We could hear no more voices, just the occasional shot. And then, nothing. The forest had fallen silent. We stayed where we were for hours. I wanted to venture out if they had gone, but Kensuke would not let me. He sang all the time, and the orangutans stayed huddled around us, until we heard the sound of the outboard motor starting up. Even then, Kensuke still made me wait a while longer. When we did emerge, the junk was already out to sea. We searched the island for Kikambo, sang for him, called for him, but there was no sign of him. Kensuke was in deep despair. He was inconsolable. He went off on his own, and I let him go. I came across him shortly after, kneeling over the bodies of 2 dead gibbons, both mothers. He was not crying, but he had been. His eyes were filled with hurt and bewilderment. We dug away a hole in the soft earth at the side of the forest and buried them. There were no words in me left to speak, and Kensuke had no songs left to sing. We were making our sorrowful way back home along the beach when it happened. Kikambo ambushed us. He came charging out of the trees, scattering sand at us, and then climbed up Kensuke's leg and wrapped himself around the neck. It was such a good moment, a great moment. That night, Kensuke and I sang 10 green bottles over and over very loudly over our fish soup. It was, I suppose, a sort of wake for the 2 dead gibbons, as well as an ode to joy for Kikambo. The forest outside seemed to echo our singing. But in the weeks that followed, I could see that Kensuke was brooding on the terrible events of that day. He set about making a cage of stout bamboo at the back of the cave to house the orangutans more securely in case the killer men ever returned. He kept going over and over it, and how he should have done this before, and how he would have never forgiven himself if Kikambo had been taken, how he wished the gibbons would come out when he sang, so that he could save them too. We cut down branches and brush from the forest and stacked them outside the cave mouth so they could be pulled across to disguise the entrance to the cave house. He became nervous, very anxious, sending me often over to the hilltop with the binoculars to see if the junk had returned. But as time went by, as the immediate threat receded, he became more his own self again. Even so, I felt he was always wary, always slightly on edge. Because we were running out of so many of my paintings now, because he was keeping so many of my paintings now, we found we were running out of good painting shells. So, early one morning, we set off on an expedition to find some more. We scoured the beach, heads down, side by side, just a few feet apart. There was always an element of competition with our shell collecting. Who would find them first, the biggest, the most perfect? We had not been at it long, and neither of us had found a single shell when I became aware he had stopped walking. Mika-san, he breathed, and he was pointing out to the sea with his stick. There was something out there, something white but too defined, too shaped to be a cloud. We had left the binoculars behind. With Stella yapping at me all the way, I raced along the beach and up to the cave house, and grabbed the binoculars and made for the top of the hill. A sail. 2 sails. 2 white sails. I bounded down the hillside, back into the cave, and pulled out a lighted stick from the fire. By the time I had reached the beacon, Kensuke was already there. He took the binoculars from me and looked for himself. "Can I light it?" I asked. "Can I?" "All right, Mika-san," he said. "All right." I thrust the lighted stick deep into the beacon, in among the dry leaves and twigs at its core. It lit almost instantly, and very soon flames were roaring up into the wood, licking out at us as the wind took them. We backed away from the sudden heat of it. I was disappointed there were so many flames. I wanted smoke, not flames. I wanted towering clouds of smoke. "Do not worry, Mika-san. They see this for sure. You see." We took turns with the binoculars. Still, the yacht had not turned. They had not seen it. The smoke was beginning to billow up into the sky. Desperately, I threw more and more wood onto the fire until it was a roaring inferno of flame and dark, dense smoke. I had thrown on almost the very last of the wood we had collected when Kensuke said very suddenly, "Mika-san, it is coming. I think the boat is coming." He handed me the binoculars. The yacht was turning. It was definitely turning, but I couldn't make out whether it was towards us or away from us. "I don't know," he said. "I'm not sure." He took the binoculars off me. "I tell you, Mika-san, it comes this way. They see us, I am very sure. It come to our island." Moments later, as the wind filled the sails, I knew he was right. We hugged each other there on the hilltop beside the blazing beacon. I leaped up and down like a wild thing, and Stella went mad with me. Every time I looked through the binoculars now, the yacht was coming closer. "She's a big yacht," I said. "I can't see her flag. Dark blue hull like the Peggy Sue." Only then, as I said it out loud, I did begin to hope that it could possibly be her. Gradually, hope turned to belief, and belief turned to certainty. I saw a blue cap, my mother's cap. It was them. It was them. "Kensuke," I cried, still looking through the binoculars. "Kensuke, it's the Peggy Sue. It is. They've come back for me. They've come back." But Kensuke did not return. When I looked around, I discovered he was not there. I found him sitting at the mouth of the cave house with his football in his hands. He looked up at me, and I already knew from the look in his eyes what he was going to tell me. He stood up, put his hands on my shoulders, and looked me deep in the eyes. "You listen to me very good now, Mika-san," he said. "I'm too old for that new world you tell me about. It's a very exciting world, but it's not my world. My world was Japan, long time ago. And now my world is here. I think about it for a long time. If Kimi is alive, if Michiya is alive, then they think I am dead long time ago. It would be like ghosts coming home, I am not the same person. They are not the same either. And besides, I have family here, orangutan family. Maybe killer men come again. Who look after them then? No, I stay on my island. This is my place. This is Kensuke's kingdom. Emperor must stay with his kingdom, look after his people. Emperor does not run away. Not honourable thing to do." I could see there was no point in pleading or arguing or protesting. He put his forehead against mine and let me cry. "You go now," he went on. "But before you go, you promise me 3 things. First, you paint every day of your life, so one day you be great artists like Hokusai. Second, you think of me sometime, often maybe when you're at home in England. When you look up at full moon, you think of me, and I do same for you. That way, we never forget each other. Last thing you promise, and very important to me. Very important you say nothing of this, nothing of me. You come here alone. You alone in this place, you understand? I'm not here. After 10 years, you say what you like. All that left of me then is bones. It not matter any more then. I want no one come looking for me. I stay here. I live life in peace. No people. People come, no peace. You understand? You keep that secret from me, Mika? You promise?" "I promise," I said. He smiled and gave me my football. "You take football. You very good at football. But you very much better painter. You go now." And with his arm round my shoulder, he took me outside. "You go," he said. I walked away only a little way and turned around. He was still standing at the mouth of his cave. "You go now, please." And he bowed to me. I bowed back. "Sayonara, Mika-san," he said. "It has been an honour to know you, great honour of my life." I hadn't the voice to reply. Blinded with tears, I ran off down the track. Stella didn't come at once, but by the time I had reached the edge of the forest, she had caught up with me. She stayed out on the beach, barking at the Peggy Sue, but I stayed where I was hidden at the shadow of the trees, and cried out all my tears. I watched the Peggy Sue come sailing in. It was indeed my mother and father on board. They had seen Stella by now and was calling to her. She was barking her silly head off. I saw the anchor go down. "Goodbye, Kensuke," I whispered. I took a deep breath and ran out onto the sand, waving and yelling. I splashed out into the shadows to meet them. My mother just cried and hugged me till I thought I'd break. She kept saying over and over again, "Didn't I tell you we'd find him? Didn't I tell you?" The first words my father said were, "Hello, monkey face." For almost a year, my mother and father had searched for me. No one would help them, for no one would believe I would still be alive. Not a chance in a million, they said. My father, too, he later admitted he had given me up for dead, but never my mother. So as far as she was concerned, I was alive. I had to be alive. She simply knew it in her heart. So they had sailed from island to island, searching until they had found me. Not a miracle, just faith. And then there's what's called a postscript, so you might know this is a PS in a letter. 4 years after this book was first published, I received this letter. "Dear Michael, I write to tell you in my bad English that my name is Michiya Ogawa. I am the son of Dr. Kensuke Ogawa. Until I read your book, I thought my father had died in the war. My mother died 3 years ago, still believing this. As you say in your book, we lived in Nagasaki, but we were very lucky. Before the bomb fell, we went into the countryside to see my grandmother for a few days, so we lived. I have no memories of my father, only some photographs and your book. It will be a pleasure to talk to someone who knew my father as you did. Maybe one day we could meet. I hope so. With my best wishes, Michiya Ogawa." A month after receiving this letter, I went to Japan and I met Michiya. He laughs just like his father did. And that's the end of the book. So, kind of a sad but happy ending in the end, I think, isn't it? Right. We'll talk to you soon and look after yourselves. Bye-bye.